30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. 5 seconds.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at sunsky.mysteries.com.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SET.
Well, good evening, everybody. Bill Zam here. Welcome to the show. Tonight is Tuesday night, and Tuesday night, of course, is interview night. And we have a very special guest for you tonight. In fact, it's so special I decided to run the camera so you could see me. But let's get to the screen capture and take a look at the beginning part of the show here. One thing we have to be careful of, all of us, is when we're doing research. We have to avoid being labeled fringe nutcases, conspiracy believers, and things like that. And the way to do that is with a lot of research. What has to be done is that events, actions, observations, and theories have to be documented as much as possible. Now, I cannot tell you how many stories and events that I do not cover or toss out halfway through a segment, even though it's, especially when it starts looking hinky. If a story doesn't look quite right to me, I'll just stop in the middle, and you guys know I just tell the audience this is a load of garbage. One of the things that I do not do, what I refuse to do, is surround myself or have people on the show that do not challenge me or the mainstream facts. Like you, I am here to learn. Our guest tonight is one of those researchers. He is one of the people that actually do the work that you see others like me spouting off about. Now, here's the deal. There is some variety of opinion as to exactly what type of star system we belong to, and our guest will probably be able to go into that a little bit more. At one time, it was said 2 out of every 3 stars of our type were in a binary system, a 2-star system. However, I have been finding that since 2010, there's been a lot of poo-pooing of that figure, which to this reporter seems odd that there would be a sudden observational shift, especially after we had that abundance of apparent evidence. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring in our guest. He is the Grand Master at rabbithole2.com, and everybody knows him as Lucus. He has done many videos. He did a 9/11 documentary that I believe holds some records on YouTube. So without further ado, welcome our guest, Lucus. Lucus, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Bill.
Not a problem. I understand that out there where you are, you're getting some snow and cold weather.
Yeah, it's been snowing a little bit over the last couple of days. It was -6 this morning here in Colorado Springs when I woke up, and yeah, it's been kind of cold.
Yeah, that is definitely cold. Now, Lucus has done a lot of research and a lot of in-depth work on what would you call it, Lucas? Astronomical information?
Well, there's so many different facets to it. It's, you know, between archaeology, astronomical, astrology. You know, people don't realize that astrology is actually a measurement of time, and it's not a means to tell the future. So, various different aspects of this. It covers so much of a wide range of diversification. It's really hard to label it as any one thing.
Well, let me actually, Lucas made a chart back in 2009. It's kind of a time chart. And what he was saying about astrology being a measure of time. I have it up on the screen here. And you can see up here where the bullseye is on the screen, the age of Libra, the age of Virgo, the age of Leo, and down here at the bottom you can see the year. And you can see the age of Libra looks like it started, 16,800, 600 years ago, and that went on to 14,000 years ago. So that's what we mean by a measurement of time. And maybe you can explain a little bit more about that, because most people, they look in the newspaper and they see their astrology forecast, and well, that's all they go by. They don't really know what it really means or what it entails. So maybe you can explain that a little bit.
Well, the zodiac circle is one of the oldest human symbols. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. In fact, the old depictions of Christianity with Christ in the middle, and the used to have the 12 constellations around it. So it's one of the oldest depictions that the humans have put down on paper or rock, whatever you want to call it. And they used to use it as a means to measure long distance of time, you know, from the different ages. It seems like that with each age was brought in a new Messiah to kind of shove humanity in a certain direction. Back when we went into the age of Aries, we were coming out of the age of Taurus, and Moses cast out the golden bull, pushed away that whole Taurus mentality, and brought in the age of Aries by blowing the ram's horn and by anointing the doors with the lamb's blood. And then you come to the next age where Jesus Christ brings in the age of Pisces, the two fish, or Jesus, the fisher of men. So it seems like we go through these ages, and which we're coming to now. We're coming to the age of Aquarius, which is the water bearer, the guy that pours out the water. And it even says in the Bible, Jesus says that, I'm paraphrasing here, he says, so, when you see a man with a pitcher, accept him, basically, is what he says.
That's very interesting. I have your chart up on the screen, and I'm pointing out various aspects of it. I guess more than likely we're going to be referring to this thing an awful lot during the show, because there's so much information on here. This is amazing, the job that you did on this chart. I am blown away by it the more I look at it. So, can you go a little bit into it, let's say starting at the age of Gemini?
Okay, well, basically, we started into the Ice Age about 3,600 years ago. What that chart is it's basically, it's a smaller segment of a larger ice core data. And what I did is I broke that down. I measured sea level, global temperature, and extinction events, and also the rise and fall of civilizations across the planet. And so basically it looks like about around 20,000, between 15 and 20,000 years ago is when the Ice Age actually completely came to an end. And what looks to happen is, at that time period, there was an advanced civilization of people on planet Earth, and when the Ice Age came to an end, it basically ended their society. And what I suspect happened is that a large, dense object in space came through the solar system and basically shifted Earth's axis about 2,000 miles. And that would explain why the woolly mammoths were in Siberia, frozen solid, because at one time Siberia was 2,000 miles closer to the equator. North America was 2,000 miles closer to the North Pole. That's why all the big glaciers formed. And then what happened is, when this object came by, it tilted the world's axis about 2,000 miles, bringing North America down further, which melted the glaciers and thrusting Siberia up towards the pole, which then froze all those woolly mammoths. They also found fruit trees with fruit still on the vines, frozen solid, and they also found coral reefs also in that area. So it tells you that at one point in time that area was much more temperate. So if you go back, you'll notice that the ocean levels were about 500 feet lower about 17,000 years ago. And most of the time, if you look at current mankind, we live by the oceans, typically. About more than 1/3 of the population of the world lives next to the ocean, because that's where the fish are and that's where all the ports are and everything. So when the ocean levels rose, it buried a good portion of the cities that existed back then. And so if you keep on coming up the timeline, you'll notice a series of steps. It looks like about every 3,600 years that there is some sort of event that takes place that actually causes global catastrophe. If you go back to the time when Plato dated Atlantis, that was about 11,500 years ago. 3,600 years before that is when all the big, or at that time period, I'm sorry, is when all the big animals like the giant Irish deer, the woolly mammoth, the giant sloth, things like that, they all disappeared. Then if you come 3,600 years further into the future than that, you had eruptions of major volcanoes, you had a mega tsunami, a lot of global catastrophes. Then if you come another 3,600 years up past that, basically you had the end of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. The Minoan civilization died out. The first Babylonian dynasty ended. The Indus Valley people, they ended. That's when the Mayan calendar, or the Mayan civilization started, right at that time period. The Sup civilization died out. The Xia dynasty from China. So basically you had the entire world, every civilization on Earth basically stopped and then restarted 3,600 years ago.
So it looks like it's obviously a 3,600 year cycle, and that brings us into the astronomical section of the discussion, which is what causes that cycle to occur every 3,600 years. Now, Lucas and our frequent guest Boris and everybody on the show, we all know what that is, and Lucas is a fresh voice to our discussion, so we are going to talk to him about our friend that everybody knows is either Planet X, Naribu, the Destroyer, Nemesis, whatever name you want to hang on it. So let's discuss that. Now, what's your understanding from your research as to exactly what this thing is?
Well, what it's not, I know it's not a normal planet, it's not a normal star, because amateur astronomers would have found it by now and be talking about it. So we know it's not one of those. Most likely it's either a brown or red dwarf, or a neutron star, or a magnetar. Now, a brown or red dwarf is a failed star, a big giant ball of gas that didn't have enough mass to start a nuclear fusion reaction at the core. So basically what happens is you have this object that pulls in on itself, and at the same time what it's doing is that the atoms are really excited in it, so it's basically emitting all of its energy in the form of radiation rather than like our sun does, where it emits its energy in the form of light and heat and burns up most of that radiation in the process. So a brown dwarf star is very cold in relative retrospect to the other stars in the universe. In fact, the first one was not even imaged until 1995, and you know, we couldn't even prove that they existed until then. And so this thing would be virtually impossible for any backyard astronomer to spot with a telescope.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be a neutron star, which is a very phenomenal exotic object in space. Neutron stars are remnants of a, like, let's say Betelgeuse goes hypernova. Hypernova is the next step above supernova. It's when a large massive star goes supernova. Anyway, what happens is it blows off all the protons and electrons of the atoms, and all the neutrons that are left over bind together into this tightly bound ball that is only about 12 to 15 miles across, but so incredibly dense, it's mind-boggling. If you'd have a piece of a neutron star as big as a sugar cube. It would weigh over 150 million tons. So that tells you how dense these objects are. And it wouldn't take, an amateur astronomer would not be able to spot a neutron star being only 12 to 15 miles across until it was right up on us. So, and a magnetar is basically a neutron star with a very dense magnetic field.
Now, our astronomy researcher, Boris Artemenko, he's down there in Brazil, and he's been studying this thing for many years, and it sounds like you and he are pretty much on the same page with just some minor differences. He's saying, and according to him and his sources, that this is actually a small system that's coming in, and the Planet X, or whatever you want to call it, is one of the parts of that system.
Yeah, I could agree that that could happen. Like it says in the, I don't really quote the Bible very much, but it says that I saw a dragon in the sky, a red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns on each head. So that would, kind of symbolize the whole planetary thing, an object with 6 little objects, orbiting it.
Yeah, that sounds about the direction that everybody's going in. I arrived at it independently before I even knew Boris, and it appears that you've arrived at the same essential conclusion. So I think with so many widely varying people that are coming to the same conclusion, it looks like we're definitely onto something. The question is why are the powers that be not saying anything about this?
Well, to put it in a nutshell, all you got to do is look at a Black Friday, and that should answer anybody's question as to why they don't say anything, because the majority of masses out there aren't very good in a crunch, I guess you could say. They become mob mentality. Idiocy kind of spreads amongst people, and so if you would tell the public what was going on, what they've known about for at least 30 years, people would stop going to work, and they'd stop paying their bills, and they'd stop paying their rent, and we'd go into this event already with the collapsed society. They've been trying to hold it together all these years. I suspect that they've known for at least 100 years, and possibly longer, and they created the Federal Reserve System and all that as a means to try and float the economy just long enough for this event to happen, and then to be able to run to their bunkers at the last minute, and you can see the effects of that now. The economy, they keep having to put Band-Aids on the economy because, imagine how hard it is to plan out a global economy for at least 30 years and have it pretty much end right before the big event. So
it almost seems like they're fine-tuning the disaster and when they want it to happen. Like Kay in Men in Black said, humans are smart, but people are dumb and irrational.
Yep, and especially in a mob mentality.
Yeah.
A perfect example is in India. They had a prayer meeting where there were hundreds of thousands of people praying, and a rumor got started that there was a fight. And it was just a rumor. There was no fight, but the rumor itself caused a stampede, which several, I think over a dozen people were trampled to death. And so it just tells you that, the mob mentality, you can't, you gotta avoid that whole thing, because nothing good ever comes of it.
Well, apparently they didn't have any of the Walmart pepper spray with them.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a funny one. I love that story.
That's why they don't tell anybody, because you just watch a Black Friday and how people act. If they're going to trample each other for a $10 toaster, imagine what they do if they thought that there's going to be some big cosmic event that was going to possibly end their life.
Looking back, a thought just occurred to me, and this has probably occurred to other people, and it's probably occurred to you. Looking back, we look at the Jews leaving Egypt, and then before that we see the end of other civilizations, and before that we see the end of Atlantis, And you mentioned earlier that there seems to be a savior that comes along. Looks like towards the end of each cycle. Could it be that humanity just goes absolutely bonkers at the end of the cycle, and they're trying to avoid that this time around?
I think that they probably do go bonkers. That's probably why Atlantis was supposedly at war with two different nations. They were probably doing the same exact thing we're doing now, and that's to try and sum up the world's resources, oil and water, and get those under our thumb before the whole big event happens. And yeah, so it does seem that way. You want to know what's weird? And I didn't believe this at first. Somebody told me, actually Harlan, the owner of Brave New Books, told me about this, and I was like, yeah, right, whatever. But I verified it, and it's true. And remember the UFO that hovered over the Temple Mount in Jerusalem?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the next morning they found a newborn baby laying on the ground there.
I heard that.
And so I didn't believe me, and then I looked it up, and sure enough, it was in all the Israeli newspapers. And what they did is they didn't run the story until a week later on the next Monday.
Yeah.
So they said Monday a baby was found, but it wasn't that Monday. It was the prior Monday. So yeah.
Yeah, I
Crazy.
saw that right after that, because that was. I looked into all of the different videos and everything, and you could spot the fakes, and it turns out the one that everybody thought that was a fake was actually the real one, and all the ones that everybody was broadcasting were actually the fakes, so they were all screwed up on that. But I heard about that baby right after that, and you haven't heard a word about it since.
Yeah, it went into Israeli, custody, and then nothing was ever mentioned after that.
What do you think?
I don't know. Maybe there's intervention from some other thing. The Chinese are building the ghost cities that depict aerial scenes that can only be seen from the sky with a giant alien head. So there might be something more to it.
We covered that last week. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you've heard about this, but out in the desert in China, there are giant designs on the desert floor. They look sort of like barcodes, and you can only see them from space.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And there's also other ones too that I saw.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen those news stories or seen those images. Do you think all that's tied together? Do you think there's a purpose going on building those ghost cities?
Well, yeah, like let's go to Ordos. Ordos, like Novus Ordo Seclorum, it's built about 500 miles from the ocean. It's 4,600 feet in elevation. It can house several tens of thousands of people, and yet it remains empty. And what's interesting about Ordos, and I just noticed this, about a month ago, and put it in my new documentary, 188 Days, was that when you're looking at Ordos at a ground level, you don't really notice anything, but once you come out to where you're at about elevation about 10,000 feet, you can see that they've created this elaborate scene that can only be seen from the sky, and it's the Earth, the Moon, the Sun being blocked out by the dark star, and a giant alien head looking on the whole scene. And what's interesting is how intricate and detailed this city is. Like the Earth is actually a giant, like, sports-looking stadium, but they went to the extreme to paint all the seats different colors, blue and green, so that when you come out to 10,000 feet, you see the Earth with Asia facing you, because some of the seats are green, which make up Asia, and then the rest are blue, which make up the ocean. So they actually went to great detail to build these cities. And why would they do this? Why would they make cities? And they also, there's another symbol there in Ordos. It's the symbol of a spider. In Chinese, it means happiness dropped from the heaven. So there's something to it.
That's bizarre. How much do you know about these cities? What's their location?
Well, Ordos it's about 500 miles away from the ocean. It's in Inner Mongolia, New China, And if you go to, anybody who wants to see these can just go to Google and type in Chinese ghost cities, and you'll pull up a Mail Online article. That's the one you want to read, and they've got all the names of the cities. And then if you want to find them, you just go to Google Earth and type in a name, and it'll take you right to the city.
I've actually got the Google information up on the screen for the viewers to take a look at. Right here, we've got them on. We've got it on YouTube, Satellite Photos, Business Insider has got it. Sky News has got that on there. They're pretty. A lot of people know about it. When did they build these? Do you know?
They've been, well, that picture of Ordos, I believe, was taken in 2010, and you could see construction still going on. They're building. What's weird, another thing that's weird about Ordos that I noticed after I put up my documentary was that you have 3 different alien head scenes. You have the one building that looks like an alien head looking down over the whole event. Then if you go out further, part of the city makes up an alien head. But then if you go out even further, the whole city of Ordos itself is a giant alien head. It's creepy.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the satellite photos of these things. These things are just bizarre. It's like, why would they build these? What reason would they have to build them? I'm looking at the alien head right now. I believe that's what it is.
You know, maybe they're interacting with something else. I'm not sure. You know, I've never really got too much into although I do believe that there are extraterrestrials or whatever, whether they're extraterrestrials or whether they're a species that lived on this planet back during the dinosaur days and have advanced to a level well beyond, I don't know, but I do believe that there is something of a higher intelligence that's cruising around out there, and I don't know exactly what their mission is, but I do believe they're here.
Do you think they're interacting with the governments?
I don't know. I would think so. One of the most interesting footage that I've seen was back in, I think it was 1952, UFOs over Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was interesting about that is the formation of UFOs. There were 11 UFOs, 2 in the front, 9 in the back, so you have 9/11 right there. You also have groups of 3 and 2-2. So you'll notice, and I've noticed this in several UFO formations, that 9/11 pattern plus also groups of 3 and 2-2, like 3 UFOs and then 2 UFOs and 2 UFOs underneath it. So I don't know whether they're creating these formations as a form of communication or whatnot, but there's something to it. I haven't really delved too deep into the UFO thing. I've mainly concerned myself with the destroyer star and what's going on with humanity right now.
Yeah, we're looking at UFOs over Washington, the photographs of it from 1952 right now. That's I never knew that they had that shape of the formation. Now, if the governments know about and have known about this incoming visitor, as we like to call it, we know that they're building all of these underground bunkers, especially the one in Denver. And I know on your website you have a lot of information about that, and there may be some new information that people haven't heard about, especially about these underground bunkers, and especially about the one out in Denver. So can we go into that a little bit?
Well, basically they used to have Stapleton Airport, and everybody was happy with that, and then all of a sudden they built this. It's called the Denver International Airport, but on the plaque, the main headstone, or the stone for the place, it's called the Denver New World Airport. There's also a time capsule there that's not supposed to be open for a number of decades, but basically, since then, they erected for a while a statue of Anubis, the Egyptian god of underworld and death.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
They said that was just for an Egyptian exhibit. There are so many different aspects to this Denver airport. The murals itself tell a story. You've got the roof of the place was designed by a NASA scientist. It's made out of this sophisticated Kevlar material, which probably cost the airport and Armalite probably close to $1 billion to build that roof. The airport itself, most airports cost around the $100 million range, yet Denver International Airport costs well into the billions. Nobody even knows how much it really cost. Probably upwards of $4 billion to build that airport. And why do you need that much money to build an airport? All you're doing is laying down some pavement and putting a building. So there's all these underground. They built this elaborate underground tunnel system that they at first dubbed as a conveyor system for luggage and suitcases, and so they said that thing fell through, and they basically abandoned the whole thing. So it was like a cover. And what they did is they'd hire these contractors. They'd bring a contractor in. He'd work for a couple weeks. They'd fire him for no reason and bring in a new contractor. And that's part of the reason why the cost was so high, because they had to keep on bringing in all these contractors to compartmentalize the people so that nobody ever saw so much. You know, they could keep it the exposure limited. Another interesting thing that I just recently discovered about the Denver International Airport, which is absolutely mind-boggling, and that is in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Okay, back when the scientists were getting signals beamed down to them from space, and the scientists are printing out this printout that basically the signals equate to a number system, so they print it out on a piece of paper, and then the scientist looks at the paper and says, these aren't just random numbers, these are GPS coordinates. And then they go grab a globe and they look at it and they find out that's where Devil's Tower is. Well, in real life, those coordinates are absolutely amazing. If you take those coordinates and you go to Google Earth and you type in those coordinates, you got to add all the tick marks in the north and west and all that. But if you type those in, it takes you dead center to the Denver International Airport. And I don't mean like off to the side by a football field. It takes you to the dead absolute center of the airport. And so that movie was made, what, 18 years, I believe, before the Denver International Airport was just a field back then. Yeah. So a lot of crazy, and you'll notice in that movie, Close Encounters, Dreyfus keeps on saying, "This is important. This means something." They're trying to tell you something, that this is important stuff. This means something. You need to look into it.
Yeah. Oh shoot! I need to write a note down, and I don't have my pen, folks. Because while we're on this, hold on one moment. I'm writing a note down.
Well, there's all kind of
because we're going into a couple of different areas that are just absolutely amazing. The airport itself, the runways are in the shape of a swastika. And also underneath it, the access roads to the airport form a phallus and testicles. And the names of the roads are like Pena Boulevard, Union, Gap Street. So, you know, they definitely plan that out. And the article that I read is, where is it at? Newsflavor.com. The article that I read says that they started building it, decided the buildings weren't in the right spot, buried those buildings, and then built another airport on top of it.
Yeah.
And they were
but people believe that.
And they were using all kinds of different contractors. They wouldn't do what they usually do when they build an airport, and that's have one contractor do it all. They'd have a contractor do a part of the work, and then fire them, and then have another contractor come in and do some more of the work, and so on until the place was done, so nobody would have full knowledge of what the heck was in the airport. Yeah, and there's, if you'll notice, scan the area around the airport, not far, maybe 50 miles away, there is
There are vast crops that they've set up, fields, also reservoir systems, not very far away. So they're preparing there, and most likely it's the airport is built behind the largest mountain range in the continental United States. It's behind the biggest mountains, so they're preparing for that Pacific. See, that's the thing, the Pacific Ocean. 7,000 miles across, 8,000 miles tall, and 3 miles deep everywhere you go. And if the Earth's axis changes, look, the Earth's axis just changed by a couple inches, and look at the size of the tsunami it sent into Japan. Now imagine if the Earth's axis changes by miles. How big are the tsunamis going to be then?
Huge.
Exactly.
Thousands of feet tall.
And if you look, everybody should get really familiar with Google Earth. It'll give you a much better perspective on how things really work. The Great Salt Lake in Utah, about 500 miles inland from the ocean, and it's a saltwater lake. It used to be much bigger. It's basically evaporated over the last few thousand years. The salt flats that are there used to be part of the lake. The only thing that lives in Great Salt Lake are brine shrimp that are derived from the ocean. So how did that lake get there? Unless it was, a puddle left behind. Same thing with Lake Titicaca down in Peru. Lake Titicaca is, it's at an elevation of about 13,000 feet, but yet, and it's 150 miles inland, and that entire 150 miles is consistent of 14,000 foot mountains. So it's got 150 miles of 14,000 foot mountains between it and the ocean. It's a saltwater lake, or it's brackish, I should say, and it's got seahorses in it. And at the bottom of Lake Titicaca are buildings and ancient monuments of a civilization that used to live there thousands of years ago. Same thing with the Dead Sea. These are all just little puddles left behind by the Great Flood.
Yeah, the worldwide Great Flood from Noah.
Yeah, well,
from Noah's time.
Noah, Gilgamesh, the story comes from a couple different aspects, but yeah,
right.
It's probably all derived from the same source.
Yeah, everything's derived from the same basic story. So they built this airport all that way inland behind the mountain, so that when the 2,000 foot tall tidal wave comes, the airport won't get washed away. They got all kinds of crops built around there. And I'm reading this story, and apparently a lot of aircraft windows break as they come in and land or take off.
Huh,
so there's 14, there's 8, 3 airborne, another one after taking off, and it looks like it's coming from low resonance sound waves, because the FAA has no idea what's causing these things to break, and it only happens at that one airport.
What else is interesting that I recently found out about Denver Airport is the fact that if you go to Google and you type in online police scanner, you can pull up this website. I forget exactly what it's called, but they basically have every police, ambulance, and scanners online that you can listen to. And Denver International Airport has their own police force and their own fire and all that. And if you go to the Denver International link on there, you can look at the different feed notes. Like, it tells you what the different channels on the CB are, what they're used for, like 9 is emergency, all that stuff. Well, they have a channel at Denver International Airport called Stargate for some reason.
Well, I wonder why.
Yeah.
They got Anubis and they got a Stargate.
And they also have channels, gold channel, silver channel. It's almost like the channels are being set up for priority. Like, hey, these are in that movie 2012. That rich Russian guy, Yuri. He's like, I got a green card. He's like, get back in the back of the line with the other green cards. It's almost like they're setting up some sort of, a tier system, silver and gold and Stargate and things like that.
That bizarre. That actually, I want to hit on something that I believe you mentioned in one of your videos, and that's the messages that we see in the movies. You mentioned Close Encounters. It was almost like they were trying to give people a message. And I think I heard an interview with you, and I think you were on Coast to Coast. And you guys were talking about, I don't know if it was you or a caller, had actual knowledge that they are implanting messages in these movies.
Well, I'm not exactly sure whether or not it's one of three different things. Either I'm sure that they're there. I've seen enough evidence to prove to me that they're there. I'm not sure whether it's some sort of communication out in the open so that people, like, say, excuse me, let's say you and I wanted to communicate about something, but yet we didn't want a bunch of people to know about it. And I gave you, say, a trigger, like, say, every time you saw the number 33, everything for 10 minutes after that would be a message. Well, no longer will we ever have to communicate. You would always know that every time you saw that 33 in a movie or wherever, that for 10 minutes after that, the information would be important and relevant to our cause. And so, before 9/11, there were unbelievable instances of 9/11 in the movies. And then when 9/11 happened, it all stopped. Matrix, the movie The Matrix, has 4 different references to 9/11, and in fact, one is so specific. Neo's passport actually expires on September 11th, 2001.
Wow.
You know, and when Neo actually gets shot, and Trinity reaches down and kisses him, and he comes back to life, she looks over at the computer monitor, and it says probe 9/11, and it's got 3 of the 4 flight numbers on it for 9/11. When Neo walks into the kitchen to meet the Oracle for the first time, the first thing he does is he parts those rosary beads that are hanging down, which are actually a Nazi double-headed eagle, and if you look on the refrigerator magnets say 9/11. So that's just one instance. Hundreds of movies had these 9/11 references in it that are like, what is that? Lethal Weapon. Okay, remember when Danny Glover and Mel Gibson get out of the car to walk up to the house and it explodes right before they get there? Right? Well, what's interesting is, as soon as they get out of the car, there's a sign there that says no parking except for 9 to 11 a.m. on Wednesdays. Okay, now imagine this. You're in a residential area, and you have a sign that only allows you to park there for 2 hours, 1 day a week. Okay? Where in the world are you only allowed to park 2 hours for 1 day a week? Well, what you don't notice is when they're walking up to the house, a jetliner flies right over the house, and when the jet's right over the center of the house is when it explodes. And so there are just so many references that can't be explained.
That's bizarre. Well, do you know of any references to Planet X that are in the movies? I mean, besides the obvious ones, the ones that we all know about, you know, the 2012 movie, the movie that I can't remember the name of that starred, who was it, Tia Leone?
Oh, Deep Impact?
Deep Impact.
Yeah, well, that movie in itself is like a better prophet than Nostradamus. If you watch that Deep Impact and see so many things, especially when President Beck is talking, which is played by Morgan Freeman, he says so many different things. Like, you know, we've had our ambassador meet with all the world's ambassadors. You have to just look at all the things that he says, especially in his speech to the nation, that are coming true about bringing the troops home. Well, not only that, what's the interesting coincidence about Deep Impact is the fact that it was obviously a creation of the MSNBC empire.
Right.
The MSNBC is plastered all over the movie. It's almost like a co-star of the movie. And so what's interesting about that is, here you got this guy, Bill Gates, becomes filthy rich, this young kid. You know, he's not part of the old school money. And then all of a sudden he buys NBC, which then makes it into MSNBC.
Right.
And then a few years later, not even a few, just like 2 years later, they come out with this movie Deep Impact. Well, what's interesting is 10 days after Deep Impact hit the movie theaters, the Department of Justice sued Microsoft for antitrust violations. Well, they sparred back and forth for a number of years, and all of a sudden Bill Gates starts donating all this money to causes. He becomes this philanthropist, and then all the DOJ lawsuit goes away, and now he's just building global seed vaults and things like that, and vaccinations. So,
not to mention General Electric is involved in there.
The Rockefellers, so they're all planning on something big. They're relocating all their facilities, so they're planning on something. I don't know exactly. I don't even think they know exactly what's going to happen. I just know that they're planning.
Well, then why would they be planning? Where are they getting their information? Who's giving them the information?
Well, I think they got a lot of it from old ancient texts and things like that. There are a lot of there are other things that talk about the destroyer rather than, like, where the Bible is more metaphoric about it. A lot of these ancient texts are more in depth. The Culburn Bible, things like that, talk about the passing of an object in space that causes great catastrophe on the Earth, and so I think that's where they got a lot of this information. Back when we first invaded Iraq, there was this museum there,
right,
that housed all these gold and jewels and silver and all this stuff, but yet it also housed these two scrolls from ancient Sumeria. And somebody broke in through 5 layers of high security and disregarded all the importance, all the riches, and only stole the scrolls, which is very interesting.
And that's about the time they started their big building projects.
Yeah, they've been. What it seems like happened is they launched the Pioneers back in the 70s. They discovered this object. They talked about it in the news and encyclopedia. They even showed it in the 1987 encyclopedia set. And then all of a sudden, it just went away. It's like somebody realized, hey, we better shut up about this, because this is going to get indexed and somebody's going to bring it up in the future. So they just shut up about it. Right about the same time is when Dr. Charles Hapgood was killed off. Most people don't know that Dr. Charles Hapgood, the guy that came up with this whole theory that the movie 2012 is based on, he was hit by a car on December 21st of all days, 1982, excuse me. And so right about that time is when they started the propaganda campaign, the assassination attempt on Reagan, when they started changing FEMA into an organization that it is today rather than what it used to be. So it seems like the early 80s is when it all started to kick in.
That's interesting. So now you would think that they'd have archaeological evidence of these past events that's leading them to this. How do I want to ask the question? We knew about the petroglyphs, the ancient petroglyphs that you referred to, and I've got a bunch of them here for the audience to look at. Right here on the screen right now, folks, is our ancient petroglyphs. There's Lucas at this is when you were at the bookstore doing your presentation. And there we go. We got some of these petroglyphs of the spirals. And also the spirals that people are seeing around the world in the sky, like the Norway spiral and events like that. What do you think's causing those?
I don't know, to be honest. It's something that the ancients saw. I don't know whether it's some sort of energy vortex, whether it's the way certain comets may come into the atmosphere, get caught into some sort of vortex. I'm not exactly sure what's causing the spirals, but I do know that the ancients saw them, and they were inclined to put those spirals down in rock. And not you'll notice that 90% of these spirals are in the mountainous regions. You don't find them very often down in the plains and the low-lying regions, I suspect, because the people that lived in those regions that saw the spiral never survived to actually put it down in rock.
Huh. And I'm looking at all of these, and it looks like almost every single one of them is counterclockwise, too.
Yeah, they all pretty much saw the same thing, from what I take. And another thing is, there's weird devil-like creatures that are I have not figured out exactly what the devil creatures are, but there are definitely devil-like creatures, horned creatures associated with these spirals. And so I don't know. A lot of craziness. So many facets to this. It's like having a million-piece jigsaw puzzle, and we're only starting to get part of the border of one corner done.
Yeah, I've got one of the horned figures with the spiral. I think this actually came from your website. There's the horned figure. The sun is behind them. There's a spiral. The imprint of a hand over the top of it, and what looks like boot prints underneath it.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at the same one. I think is there's also a tablet that's broken in half.
Yep.
Yep. So, symbolizing the loss of information and knowledge.
That is so bizarre. How many of these things are there around the world?
Oh, thousands. They're everywhere in the high regions. Spiral is like the most well-known petroglyph.
Above what altitude?
Well, you find most of them around like this region, or New Mexico, the Andes Mountains over in the Alps, and basically sitting at like 5,000 feet from what I see from the majority of them.
So what reasoning do these powers that be clowns have for building all of these underground bunkers? What possible reason would they build something underground that would more than likely either get shaken apart during a pole shift or flooded?
Well, I suspect that there are a number of reasons. One, incoming objects. With this object coming in, Earth has already been hit by a number of asteroids in the last couple of years that are being covered up. Colombia was hit by an asteroid that left a 300-foot crater this year. Mexico was also hit by an asteroid that left a 100-foot crater. And the news is just covering us up. So I suspect that's part of the reason. Also, when I look back at ancient stories of levitation and ascension, and things like that, and you look back at the story of the Tower of Babel, and you start to put two and two together, that maybe possibly there might be some sort of gravity fluctuation when this whole thing happens. Like if you go, like say, the Egyptians, they used to celebrate a 360-day calendar before they had to change it 3,600 years ago. Well, that would tell you that something with a high gravity grabbed Earth and pulled us away from the sun just a little bit, just to add a couple extra days to orbit. That's what caused the temperature started to drop. So if that happens, then the side of the planet that would be facing the object could possibly have some severe gravity fluctuations, where maybe that's where the old stories of people ascending into heaven came from. They didn't actually ascend. There was no gravity to hold them down on the planet Earth. And that's also why maybe these waves can get so incredibly large, is because they don't have gravity holding them down to the planet, which theoretically a wave could get any height with lack of gravity.
Yeah, I've got your chart back up on there. The folks, the little thin line that looks almost like an EKG, a little heartbeat line, I believe that's the temperature, isn't that right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's the temperature, and you can see the temperature fluctuations. In fact, you can see the temperature fluctuations right now. Just what was it? 327 years ago or so, we had a drop, and that was called the Little Ice Age. That was called what? The Mid-Cambrian Age. I believe.
Yeah.
And it looks like, in our current time, the temperature levels are relatively flat.
Well, for the last, that little flat part in the last part is just the lack of data there for the last, 70 years to compare it to the rest from the ice core data. But if you also look at that chart, you'll notice the blue line is sea level. And so here, while all these global warming scientists are trying to cram down our throats that the ocean levels are going to rise, that's all malarkey. The ocean levels are actually dropping. In fact, they were 17 feet higher, and they've dropped 17 feet over the last 3,600 years, and they're going to continue to drop because we're going into the actual second stage of the Ice Age. The Ice Age takes a number of steps to get down to the bottom of the Ice Age. It's not an instant thing that happens overnight. So we go through these every 3,600 years. The temperature of the Earth drops about 1.5 degrees, which then brings us a little closer to the Ice Age.
Okay. Are you familiar with the expanding Earth theory?
Yes, I've done a little research into it, not very much.
Yeah, we had Cliff Eye on our first show, and he's explained to me about the expanding Earth theory. What do you think of that theory and the ocean levels, as well as the temperature levels?
Well, I haven't really done enough research into the expanding Earth theory to, make an educated, comments on it. What I do think is that nothing should be discredited until it's actually discredited. And that's the thing. We know the Earth is round. Okay, so you can discredit the Earth being flat.
Right.
Okay, that's something we can all agree on. But nobody can seem to see. Some people seem to think there's a hollow Earth. Some people seem to think that the moon is a UFO. There's so many different theories out there to what's going on, and all we can do is just take the information we have and come up with an educated guess based upon the variables we have in front of us.
That's where the research comes in, folks. Always do as much research as you can. So they're building these underground bunkers that are more than likely going to get flooded, the way it sounds to me. And I know you've done some work on the chemtrails and the barium contained within them. Is that right?
Oh yeah. Well, I think the majority of chemtrails are being used to block out excess radiation from the brown dwarf star, or whatever object is in space. And if you look back, the ancient stories of how man used to live to be hundreds of years old, and that was approximately 1800, 2000 years ago. Now that would put, if this object is in a 3,600-year orbit, that means that about that time period, the object would be in the far reaches of our solar system at the very apex of its orbit, where it was about to turn around and start coming back towards the sun, which would mean it was very far away, which would explain why people probably lived to be hundreds of years old, because they weren't getting bombarded by radiation from space, cosmic rays, from this object. Most people don't. If you ask the average everyday person what radiation is, they have no idea. They think it's some kind of poison like cyanide that you can, you get and it kills you. But radiation is just basically the pieces of an atom that are flying off of the atom. You have the protons and electrons basically flying off of the atom and then going through your body, hitting your DNA strands and breaking it, which causes cancer or burns or however much radiation there is. So if this object was in the far part of the orbit, that would explain why people live to be so old, and now it's very close to us. And when I'm talking close, I don't mean it's like 10 miles out. This thing could be millions and millions and millions of miles out, but still be putting off vast amounts of radiation, which basically the human body, after 60, 70 years of getting bombarded by subatomic particles, has had about enough and ends up giving up.
Right. Oh, I know I saw something on your website about, and I read this when it happened, about some kids were on a field trip, and they all got sunburned. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in February, too. It was like in the middle of February, cold day. They were on a field trip, They weren't even outside for very long. They basically went from their school to the bus to the field trip where they were inside a building, then back onto the bus, then they went somewhere to eat, and then they went back to school, and they had sunburn. So that would tell you that there was probably at that point in time, there was probably some sort of fluctuation with the magnetic field at that place that allowed vast amounts of solar and radiation and cosmic rays to come through. It's probably also what's killing the birds and fish too, is fluctuations in the magnetic field, causing it to drop in some places, thus allowing vast amounts of solar wind and things to come in.
Is that going to cause earthquakes too?
I don't know enough about that to comment. That's the theory of 2012, that the neutrinos come in and loosen up the Earth's crust from the mantle, and I don't know whether I do know that the subatomic particles now are causing a physical reaction, just like it said in that movie, that scientists are baffled at why carbon dating is not working right for them, because the decay rate of carbon atoms is different now than it was a couple years ago, and it's always been constant. So there's something going on.
So that's was that something that was in a movie, or is that?
No, that's real. That's the actual decay rate of carbon is baffling scientists. Over the last couple of years, it's changing, and their carbon dating is becoming unreliable because the rate of decay of carbon is changing for some reason, and they can't explain why. And coming back to the chemtrails, I believe that the majority of them. Now, I'm not saying that all of them. Obviously, some of them are used as biological experiments on the public, and others are used as this and that and the other. But I think the vast majority of chemtrail spraying you see up there is to block radiation, because you think the elites live on this planet too, and they're just covering their own butts. They die from radiation just like everybody else. Their kids die and everything else. And barium is used to absorb radiation. And there's also aluminum. Now, if you put this in conjunction with HAARP, then you can spray this stuff up in the atmosphere and then bombard it with HAARP and basically get the barium and the aluminum molecules vibrating as fast as possible to not only deflect but absorb as much possible radiation as they can.
That's and now we're getting into the HAARP aspect of it, which is always a good subject to talk about, especially when you're talking about the chemtrails, because there does seem to be some type of relationship between the HAARP, which, if the audience doesn't know, is essentially a low-frequency transmitter that they're using to heat the atmosphere to supposedly use for communications with submarines. That's what they say out in the public. And they do a lot of this work right out in the open. They have a website, and they tell you when they're broadcasting and everything else. But it appears that a lot of this HAARP activity does seem to be related to both the earthquakes, weather, and the chemtrails. And it all appears to be, it's like this HAARP thing is kind of like an all-purpose trigger mechanism.
Yeah, that's why one thing about what happens when there is lack of truth in any area, a vacuum forms, and everybody starts forming all these different opinions. I have yet to see any evidence that HAARP has caused any volcanoes to erupt or anything like that. What I do notice is that as soon as something happens, whether there's an earthquake or not, everybody starts jumping on the HAARP bandwagon. Well, it's, I've heard HAARP blamed from anywhere from mind control to, causing earthquakes, to being a anti-nuclear defense system, to being involved with Project Bluebeam. And the only evidence I see is that they're probably using it to block out as much possible radiation, because radiation is very harmful to all living creatures, and
yes.
You've got to somehow limit the amount of exposure or else you're going to have to go underground. It's one of the two.
So this object that's coming in, what other kind of interactions do you think it's going to have, say, with the sun, with our own magnetic shield, the Van Allen belt?
Well, I do believe this is what dictates the magnetic pole flips on Earth, that when this object comes from the south ecliptic and breaks that line up to the north, it'll probably flip the poles of not just Earth but all the planets, the magnetic poles, that is. And when this object comes through, we may not even, if it's a brown dwarf, first of all, people got to realize, all these people that are putting out these thousands and thousands of videos of, oh, I saw two suns, I saw this, and that's not going to be your object, most likely. If science holds true for what a brown dwarf really is, then that means it will be invisible to the naked eye.
Right.
It will be completely just a black circle in space. You may see the interaction of the plasma from the sun vibrating around the edges of the star, but you will not see the actual star itself. You'll just see a big black circle. And so I don't really think anybody has imaged this object as of yet. And as for interactions, it'll probably cause the gravitational pull, will probably pull the oceans. See, the tides that happen on the Earth are nothing but a little miniature tsunami caused by the moon.
Right.
The moon goes around the planet, and basically a bulge of water follows the moon wherever it goes. And so if you have a heavy, dense object, that could also form a gigantic bulge of water, and as the world spins, it could pull the water right over the land, just like the moon does.
Yeah, our producer is telling me she lives in Mexico, right on the Pacific coast, and she has been one of the people that's she has taken some extremely excellent photographs of the object next to the sun, I mean, really good ones, and she's also been getting a black disc next to the sun too. And not a planet. It's pretty big in some of her photographs. So that may be our mystery object. I didn't even think about that until you mentioned it just a minute ago. But she is getting some really, really good photographs of this stuff.
Now, a black disc would be what you'd be looking for. Just an area where you couldn't see any stars behind it. And
right.
Now, I'm not talking the black dot that you see in the Meteor station. That is a lens anomaly.
Yeah.
A lot of people jump on that. Another thing is, before I forget, the Meteor station, go look up their logo from 1999 to 2000. They show Antarctica with a magnifying glass over it and 3 pyramids under the magnifying glass. So what are they looking for down there?
Oh, it just keeps getting better and better, doesn't it? For the folks that don't know, the Meteor station, I believe it's Neymay. MEU. It's a Arctic research station, and they have a series of webcams, and a lot of the, let's call them conspiracy buffs, the ones that don't really do a lot of research, they always point to the webcam images of the sun as it comes up over the horizon down there, and a lot of them have a little black dot on them or whatever, and a lot of what they're seeing are basically lens anomalies.
Yeah, I've got that too. By taking pictures of the sun, I've got that same exact black dot for years on different cameras. So
yeah, you got to remember, folks, the lens on a webcam is just a little bit bigger than the head of a nail. If you've ever pounded a nail or had like a 6-penny nail, the glass on the lens is that small. So it's going to have a lot of distortions and everything in there, and that's basically what you're seeing in a lot of the Meteor webcam videos. Plus, it's so darn cold down there, that's got to affect the electronics in the thing too.
Yeah, I don't blame people for getting all hyped up about seeing something in the sky. A lot of these things are sundogs. A lot of them are if they're taking a picture through their car, you're getting a reflection off the windshield.
Right.
And I get sent these pictures like all the time, and I have yet to find anything that, if an object was that close that it was right next to the sun, I do believe we'd probably be noticing the effects tremendously of it by now. So, some of these things might be Venus, when it makes its pass in front of the sun. So,
right. Yeah, it's so hard to say. We have so little. I mean, we're on the ground. We have so little evidence. We don't have access to any of the satellites that the government has, or NASA, or anybody else, and they're not. Excuse me. They're not giving us any information. That's what really bugs the crap out of people like us.
Well, it causes a vacuum, and it causes people to jump on conspiracy bandwagons where everything is a conspiracy, and next thing you know, they think their own mom is a spy for the CIA. There are a lot of conspiracies, don't get me wrong, but not every single thing is a conspiracy. And so you just get a lot of, it's from the vacuum of information. People want to fill in that gap somehow.
Yeah, and there's big obvious conspiracies, like the video that you did about 9/11. That I actually just watched it today. Is there any new information about that?
About 9/11?
Yeah.
Well,
a lot of people probably haven't seen the video, so why don't we go into that a little bit?
Okay. Well, it's called The Ultimate Con. I did it back in 2005. That's when I started it. I released it at the beginning of 2007. It's always been free on the internet. I've had lots of people try and buy it from me, but I just keep telling them it's free on the internet. And basically what I did is I had seen all these other 9/11 documentaries with various people, implanting their conjecture about this and that and the other. And what I did is I decided to make a documentary with no conjecture or theory to it, that it would just be news stories in order to tell the story. All the suppressed stuff that maybe you missed, that they only played for 30 seconds on the day of 9/11 and then was never replayed again. So I took all that together and I put it into a cohesive documentary so that you could actually see all these instances of things that happened on that day, like all the reports of explosions in the World Trade Center and bombs that brought the buildings down and all that. And I put the trailer up on YouTube, which is now the most watched 9/11 video on YouTube of all time. And it's up to close to 26 million views by now.
Yeah, it's huge. I saw it today, and it's go and watch it. It's a pretty darn good video. It's put together very well. The part that I cued in on, because I was disabled at the time, so I was sitting here in the living room watching all this 9/11 coverage, and that was when they quote-unquote brought down building number 7. And that was the most bizarre part of the whole thing to me, is when apparently they brought that building down, because there was a news story before the building came down that the building came down, and then all of a sudden the building came down afterwards.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it was owned by Larry Silverstein, who made that comment. We decided to pull it, and so his rebuttal to that, when questioned about, what do you mean pull it? What do you mean pull it? He said, "Oh, I decided to pull the firemen from the scene." Well, I totally debunked that, because what the heck does Silverstein have any say in what the fire department does? The fire chief doesn't call up Silverstein and say, "Hey, what should I do with my fire guys?" And he says, "Oh, pull them." That doesn't work like that. The fire chief tells Silverstein what's going to happen, and that's the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole thing was so bizarre. And now we're completely off track on the Planet X thing.
Well, it's all little facets of a gigantic diamond.
There's so many pieces to the puzzle, you just get lost. in all the minutia that's out there. It's like this leads to this and this leads to that. It's like when you're on the internet and you go to and you're going to look up. You want to buy a new pair of tennis shoes, so you start exploring tennis shoes, and the next thing you know, you're looking at ancient scrolls in Sumeria, and you have no idea how you got there. They distract you so much from what you're looking for, and it really takes a lot of training to stay on track.
Yeah, September 11th is the New Year's Day of the ancient Coptic calendar. Most people don't know that Fox News was founded on September 11th, 1922. Its parent company, the Sun Pictorial out of Australia by Rupert Murdoch, founded September 11th, 1922. Most people don't see all the connections between September 11th and the fact that Dylan Klebold of the Columbine Massacre was born on September 11th, and when he was a young kid, he was enrolled in a government program called CHIPS, Center for Higher Intelligent People. And so there are a lot of weird things, that can't be explained as of yet.
That is just so bizarre. It's like all the movie clues. Speaking of that, when you were talking about lack of gravity and the possibility that the lack of gravity could cause these super tsunamis, there was another science fiction movie out where that actually did happen, because apparently a black hole hit the moon in that movie, and that was causing a lack of gravity, and people were floating up into the air.
Oh, what movie was that? I've never seen that.
Oh, man, I don't remember. It's always on the Sci-Fi Channel. It's a really, really crappy movie.
Every movie on the Sci-Fi Channel is really, really crappy.
As the opinion of the guest and not the official opinion of the network.
I don't know where they get their... It's like they have this, like template where you go and you plug in... Here's going to be my actors. You get to pick from a list of like 20 different scripts and what your monster is going to be, and they press a button and out pops a movie.
Yeah, I've noticed that. It's all CGI graphics, and they're all really bad, and you can tell they were done like in an old Amiga or something like that. Some kid in his basement with an Amiga popping these movies out with a green screen, and everybody stands in front of a green screen. Okay, now you say this.
Some of the graphics from movies back in the 50s and 60s are better than some of these CGI graphics being put up by the Sci-Fi Channel. That's for sure.
Yeah, I've noticed that, especially the giant spiders that they keep putting up on the movies. Looking on your website, I see you have one section called Sonic Booms. And that's something that I've actually been exploring myself. What do you know about all of these Sonic Booms?
Well, I know that they've been rattling people. There was one in, I think we actually might have seen a case where the USGS actually concocted an earthquake. Usually they're deleting earthquakes, but back maybe about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, Georgia, there was everybody heard a loud boom, and the ground shook. And so thousands of people called in and were like, why is the ground shaking? There's an earthquake. And the USGS said, no earthquake. And then, like 2 hours later, they finally put an earthquake on their website, like to explain why the ground shook. But everybody said that it felt like it came from the sky, that they felt like a pressure wave come from above down, and they felt it on their shoulders. So I would suspect that these are just objects in space coming in, little meteoroids, meteorites, minor asteroids, things like that. There is significant evidence to show that the San Bruno explosion out in California was not just a gas explosion, that it was instrumented by an impact event. If you look at the crater left, all the debris from whatever happened blew all the stuff out to one side, just like if an asteroid came in and dug out a trench and pushed all the debris on one side. Plus, you got witnesses saying they saw something come down from the sky. They thought it was a plane crash at first. Then you've also got an earthquake that happened right at that same exact time. it was a 1.1 earthquake that happened at 0 depth. And then also there's another video that is of a guy at an Exxon station pumping his gas, and if you look carefully, on the side of the gas pump is like kind of a brushed aluminum, which
Right.
makes it a little bit of a reflection. You can see something streak down from the sky, and then the fire, he ducks down, and then all of a sudden the fireball comes like 6 seconds later. So there's significant evidence to show that that was probably an impact event also, because we've got 2.6 million miles of gas lines in America.
Right.
So anywhere that an asteroid would hit or an object would hit in a populated area is going to blow up a gas line.
Right. And I see you've also been covering a lot of the other meteorites and meteoroids that have been coming down lately.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot. In fact, we're entering into that season now. We can expect, since 2008, it seemed like every year around November, December, it started to pick up, and we were getting these amazing fireballs coming in. And when you see a shooting star go across the sky, most likely that thing is no bigger than either a piece of sand or up to a marble size.
Right.
Okay, that's about the size of those things that you see that make that amazing flash in the sky. When you're seeing objects that make these huge fireballs, we're talking basketball to, couch size. But then when you're getting these impact events, recent scientific evidence shows that the Tunguska blast in Siberia was caused by an object that was only about 22 feet across. So that tells you it doesn't have to be very big for it to cause massive devastation. And there's a difference. When you have an asteroid come in, like a rocky asteroid, what happens is it breaks through the atmosphere and it actually hits the planet and causes a crater. When you have an object like the Tunguska explosion, that was most likely caused by an ice ball that, when it got down into the atmosphere, it heated up so much that it instantly turned to steam and basically blew up and caused an air blast, an airburst.
And what are the, sounds like you're up on this, what are the different types of asteroids or meteorites that we should be aware of that can cause damage? There's the rocky meteoroids. What are they made out of?
Oh, they're made out of various, different kinds of carbon and rocks in space. Then you also have the metallic ones that have nickel and things like that, and then you have the icy object, which usually just balls of dirt and space debris and ice all compacted together, and they usually blow up in the atmosphere. And probably what's causing a lot of these sonic booms is chunks of ice.
Do you think that these are related to the object that's coming through?
Oh yeah, I think that this object has a asteroid belt, much like ours, and that we're, in the beginning stages of going into that asteroid belt. And I also think that that's what Comet Elenin was. The Comet Elenin was not in orbit with our sun. I think it was in orbit with this object. And that's why people, certain people seem to think that the comet changed directions. It's because the comet was moving in two directions at the same time. If you got an incoming body, let's just say a brown dwarf star, and it's got a comet orbiting it, not only is the comet orbiting the object, but it's moving with the object through space. So that means it's actually like corkscrewing through space, which would give it an appearance to people that it was changing directions. So when I suspect that when the orbits of the sun and this object got close enough to each other, that the comet was actually ripped apart once the equilibrium balanced out between the two.
Right. That leads me to another question. What about what should we be looking for? I mean, the average person watching the news, maybe going to the astronomy sites, or has a little telescope like I have that they set up in their backyard. What are the things that we're going to be looking for? What type of interactions are we going to be seeing with the other planets?
Well, you're going to be looking for the sun. I suspect is going to You know, when you look at the sun, it has different rays that come off of it.
Right.
And they're usually pretty predictable. You can look at the sun for, months at a time and see the same sun rays coming off of it. And I suspected a bunch of the rays will all form to one side of the sun, facing towards the object. And I think that's one sign. As for here on Earth, I think that once you see all the troops coming home, and I think there'll be a big diversion. Everything is always done with a sleight of hand. On one hand, they're waving a banner, and on the other hand is the actual truth happening. And so what I suspect is that there'll be some sort of event, whether it be a city getting nuked or World War III starting, something to divert the public attention over to that when this whole thing is about to start really happening.
Yeah, we've had actually a few people on our peripheral staff talking about that. Watch for a big event when they start bringing the troops home, and by golly, here they come.
Yeah, and that's another thing they said in that movie Deep Impact.
Right.
Is, bringing the troops home, and so, yeah, there's, I wouldn't be surprised if they used the Fukushima disaster to bring all of our troops home from Japan, too. Say, hey, we don't want our troops getting any radiation, might as well bring them home.
What do you think is up with the big release of the radioactive water into the ocean? Think that was on purpose, or was it an accident, or are they trying to bring Godzilla up out of the depths?
No, I don't think it was on purpose. Like I said, the elites have to drink the same water, and they eat the same fish, and they breathe the same air as everybody else. And a lot of people said, they destroyed Japan with HAARP. That makes no sense. Japan was a finance that made the elites money. They're trying to hold this together as long as they possibly can. Mm-hmm. People want to have best of both worlds. They want to say, the elites are doing all this stuff to scare us. Well, okay, then why did they cover up the asteroid impacts in Mexico and Colombia? Don't you think that they would use those to scare us? You can't have best of both worlds. They're either A, trying to scare us, or B, trying to hold this whole thing together till the last moment, and that's what I suspect is they're just trying to keep this whole thing together long enough for them to stock up on as much supplies and things as they can before they run to their underground bunkers.
So they're stealing all the money from us so that they can buy all their survival supplies.
Pretty much, just I guess you could say stealing. The way that it works is it's social Darwinism. They get away with what you allow them to get away with. It's like the 7 deadly sins. It's like letting the vampire into your house. If you allow that vampire into your house, he's going to do as much damage as he possibly can. And so, it's a matter of sidestepping all the pitfalls that they put out for you. Because I believe personally that they're putting out both sides of the story, that they not only put out all these Britney Spears things and all that to keep the public occupied, but I also believe they're putting out things like Ancient Aliens and shows like Survivor Man and things like that to try and weed out the people who can see through the smoke to the actual fire.
What do you mean by weeding out the people? You mean teaching them how to survive?
Well, yeah, my basic thought is that we're the only creature on this planet that doesn't have a regulator to control our population and our growth. Mm-hmm. Every other plant, every other creature, whether it be lions and gazelles, they have this perfect little symbiotic relationship that keeps each other in line, and we don't have that. And I suspect that on all planets where people or where creatures become the top dog of the planet, that they end up having to be their own natural selector, where humans end up becoming both the prey and the predator at the same time, assuming both roles.
So you think maybe the Georgia Guidestones then are a big clue in this? Oh
yeah, most definitely. Everybody, all those years that they've been up, everybody always overlooked the most important word in the whole Georgia Guidestones. It says maintain humanity. The elites are very hubris, and if they wanted to reduce the population, they'd just come out and say, kill off all mankind down to 500 million. But they didn't say that. They said maintain, which is a word after the fact. And so it's like they expect the population to go down to, under 500 million, and they don't want to ever let it get up to that level again. And so the Georgia Guidestones are not only like the 10 Commandments for the new age of Aquarius, but they're also an astrological timekeeping piece, basically a giant sundial. Every day at 12 noon, the sun shines through a hole in the side of one of the stones on a spot on the floor, and would tell somebody with the knowledge of how to calculate how many days are in a year and what the growing seasons are, which is the most important thing. If you have a global catastrophic event where the axis changes, the most important thing the first thing is to find out right off the bat when the growing season is, because if you miss one growing season, that could mean the end of humanity altogether.
Right. So, are you on board with the 2012 time frame?
I don't know, to be honest. Back up until the early 80s, up until Dr. Charles Hapgood was hit by a car and killed, the consensus was that the Mayan calendar ended on December 24th, 2011. If you go back and look at, you can watch every single episode of In Search Of on YouTube right now, and there's one episode called In Search of Mayan Mysteries, where the shaman talks about the calendar ends on December 24th, 2011. Plus there's also another one, another show hosted by Rod Serling from that same era, where it's about the Mayans, and they talk about how the calendar ends then. And also the original consensus was that it didn't end with a great solar cycle, it ended with a great global earthquake. So how that got changed from 2011 to 2012, and from the fact it was an earthquake to a solar event, I don't know.
Could be that the solar event causes the massive earthquake.
Yeah, it very well could be.
Speaking of which, the volcano line of thinking. If all the volcanoes go off, obviously we're going to be looking at another ice age pretty darn quick.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely look at the global temperature dropping very fast. And, if you have an object in space that's very dense, the majority of the world is liquid. I'm not talking about the water, I'm talking about underneath the crust. Go down a couple miles, and it's all liquid, all the way almost to the core. And so, whenever you get an object that's pulling, it's going to be pulling on that liquid.
Right.
And, it's going to pull it up to the surface and out through the volcanic vents.
Well, I'm just thinking of all the volcanoes that are going off right now. I started noticing that a couple of years ago, that all the volcano incidences were ramping up. And I'm wondering about, like the New Madrid Fault, the Yellowstone supervolcano, all the other supervolcanoes around the world. I mean, New Madrid and Yellowstone are obviously most important to us because, well, we live by them. So, what do you think of the possibilities of all of that stuff going off at the same time?
Well,
or in rapid succession?
There is a area down in South America where scientists suspect a new supervolcano is forming right now, and there's an area that's miles and miles wide that's been raising up tremendously over the last decade, so, and especially in the last couple of years. So they suspect that there might be a supervolcano, actually the birth of one. I don't know whether Yellowstone is actually going to go off, or whether it's hype to keep people from coming to the mountainous regions. I don't know. I tend to, think that we're going to have a bunch of volcanoes go off. Obviously, they already are. Right. I don't know if any super volcanoes are going to go off. I've never really survived the apocalypse before, so it's really hard to tell. But Never know.
It's the first apocalypse I've ever been through.
Yeah, this is. I can't wait. I'm gonna get a shirt that says "I survived the apocalypse" and start wearing it around.
Yeah. What are the odds that we'd be born? I mean, it just figures with my luck, you know. Yeah. When were you born? Oh, during the apocalypse.
Well, I kind of look at that as,
figures.
actually, believe it or not, I look at it as a blessing, because we get to see an event that people haven't seen in thousands of years. We get to see the passing of Satan, or the devil, whatever you want to call it, the dwarf star, and that you know, we how can I put this? Most people today end up dying a slow, horrible death in a hospital bed, and that isn't no way to go. You know, I mean, we all got to go at some time. I'd much rather have it be during some sort of kind of, you know, cataclysmic event like this.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking of it. Plus, we could still be around to teach the rest of the survivors too. I mean, we could be the start of a new civilization here.
Yeah, I think that you know, I don't know what the elites have in the plans of after the fact. The New World Order is called the New World Order because it's for the New World. It's not for this world.
Right.
And I don't know whether they plan on trying erasing all of that information out, because, you know, here you're going to have one group of people saying, look, these people knew about it and planned around it. And so they are not going to want that to be so much vocalized after the fact. So I don't know. They might wipe out all the adults. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Maybe they just want to breed themselves into the Aryan nation or whatever. Who the heck knows what those clowns are doing? That's why we call the show Surrounded by Idiots, because we're trying to figure out what those idiots are doing. The Google sky, that's another conspiracy theory type of thing, where there's blank spots in Google sky. And I see you have something about that on your website. What do you know about that? How true is that? Are they actually covering something up behind those missing data blocks?
Well, I've never seen what's behind them, so I don't know if they're actually covering something up. But I do know that in the original articles that came out in the 80s about Iris found a dense object in space, and scientists thought that it was either an exoplanet or a failed star. They said it was in the constellation of Orion, in the western edge of the constellation Orion. Now, you'll notice that Orion was one of the most important astrological symbols to all the ancients, whether it be the Egyptians. They built the Great Pyramids based upon his belt.
Right.
So many different things centered around Orion, and it's called the Hunter too. But that's where the one area was blocked out by Google Earth, was in the western edge of the constellation Orion, which I found very interesting because, for some reason they didn't allow that picture to be shown. Just like they're also blocking out pictures underneath the ocean off the coast of Georgia and Florida.
Well, that's they have a whole.
Yeah, they have a whole area blocked out there that you can't see the bottom of the ocean floor, right around the Bermuda Triangle for some reason.
Why do you think that is? What have you learned about that?
Well, it's only a couple hundred miles north of where the Bimini Road was found. I suspect that there's probably, I've spent a lot of time on the ocean, and I know how the ocean works as in clarity, and for the most part the ocean is pretty cloudy, but then every once in a while you get these days when the currents match up perfectly, and they basically lay the sand down, and the ocean becomes crystal clear, and you may be able to see down hundreds and hundreds of feet. So I suspect that they don't want people to see that there are ancient structures on the ocean floor there. Especially there's right off the coast of Florida, you can see where there used to be a freshwater lake long time ago.
That I didn't know either.
I'm sorry?
That I did not know.
Yeah, like if you go to Google Earth and you go off the coast of Florida, you can see underneath the ocean, you can see where there used to be a freshwater lake, you can see the bed of it. And so I suspect that they're blocking that out because they don't want people to see that, because then they're going to... See, that's the only reason we would have to hide ancient archaeology, is because as soon as people realize that there was an advanced civilization on this planet that used to have airplanes and craft that we don't even exist today, and they were able to move 2 million pound blocks. Okay, as soon as people start to realize that they were more advanced than we are, then they're like, well, what happened to these people? And then that opens up a whole can of worms that scientists don't want to get into, so they suppress the whole kit and caboodle.
Man, their timing has to be absolutely perfect on that, because this thing's coming back.
Well, I mean, right now it's mainly just disinformation. You'll notice, like, with the no planes theory. Okay, that was one of the biggest malarkey disinformation things I ever heard. That no planes hit the World Trade Centers. I've talked to people, New Yorkers, average everyday people, who are not disinfo or anything, who saw the second plane hit. Yeah. And so it's a way of distorting the facts by putting out 27,000 different pieces of fake information. You have to sift through all that to find the real piece of truth.
Well, for the average listener that's listening to us now, what's the procedure? Do you have something you can distill down, to the basic person about how to tell the difference between total malarkey and garbage that they keep giving us, and the nuggets of truth?
Well, the thing that leads me onto things is when I see something that's not being covered by the mainstream. That's the first clue. Like the asteroid impact in Colombia. Mm-hmm. When that happened, it was covered in the newspapers and news stations down in South America, but then wasn't picked up by CNN or anything like that, and that tells you that there's more to it. And so you always look for the cookie crumbs around the lips, Right. you look for where they're trying to hide something, where they got the little smirk on their face, and they're they're trying to give you the sleight of hand. Hey, don't look at that. Look at Britney Spears. That's pretty much where I find a lot of rabbit trails are in areas where something that you would deem important, right, that isn't being covered in the mainstream media.
Yeah, like, hey, you know what? An asteroid hit there, and nobody's saying anything about it.
Yeah, I mean,
so
that's pretty important news. You would think that scientists from all around the world would flock to Colombia. They would be all over the main, front page of CNN, especially the one that happened in Mexico. Knocked down a bridge and blew down people's doors and knocked out their windows. Well, it was the first time in modern human history that an object from space actually knocked down a human structure. So you'd think that'd be big news, but it wasn't.
That's they're just. What other asteroid strikes have you heard about? Because all of these are news. This is all news to me. In all the searching I've done, I've never found any information about them.
Well, if you go to Google and type in "asteroid strikes Colombia," you'll pull up the articles on that. You'll probably get my webpage as being the top one, and on there I have the news stories, not only in print but also the video news stories from South America where they talk about it. Also the one in Mexico, and I think also what happened in San Bruno was one, and also Allentown, Pennsylvania too, because you notice that we had this wave of gas explosions that happened around the same time, and all at the same time too we had near-Earth objects just missing Earth. So
yeah, and it looks like they're all hitting on the same side of the planet too.
Yeah, so it looks like, it doesn't take a big object. An object the size of a basketball, if it hits your house, will do considerable damage if not completely destroy it.
Yeah, and it's coming down pretty fast, too.
Yeah, we're talking miles per second here. The kinetic energy from an object, when it hits like that, it releases a lot of energy and basically just blows out wherever it hits.
Yeah. Now, we're going to finish up the show by talking about NASA and one of the Apollo astronauts. I know you're familiar with this, and it's Buzz Aldrin. And I think old Buzz there, he's trying to give us some information about all of this. in the books that he's writing. And I know you've got a reference to Buzz Aldrin and a secret monolith on the moon of Mars. And that sort of relates to the Russian Mars probe that seems to have gone cattywampus on them.
Yeah, we've had a lot of Mars probes go cattywampus. I like that word. I'm going to use that in the future. Yeah, we've had lots of various Mars probes go haywire on us, and not only, I think that, well, there's a monolith on the moon of Mars. There's a monolith on Mars itself that looks just like the monolith out of that movie 2010 Space Odyssey, and 2001 Space Odyssey. Right. And so I suspect that a long time ago, back during the last ice age, that we were sophisticated enough that we actually went to Mars, went to the moon. That's why they stopped having the manned moon missions, because you know, there's a greater chance of people discovering things that we built on there thousands of years ago. Right. And that's how the Sumerians knew the sun was in the center, and how many planets we had, and the various sizes and colors of the planets. How else could they have known? They didn't have telescopes, so they must have got that information from past generations somehow.
Yeah, that's something that Boris and I have been talking about when I have him on, and he's done a lot of explorations of old cultures like Atlantis, Mu, and all the other ones, and it just seems like they reached the peak of their technology, and then all of a sudden this Planet X or Naribu or whatever you want to call it wipes them out. And it seems like we're at that cycle again. It's almost like it's some kind of weird divine intervention kind of a thing, where as soon as a society here on Earth gets up, just up to the point where it's reaching its peak, all of a sudden something knocks us right on back down to the Stone Age again. And it almost seems like these guys know about it, and they're trying to keep that from happening in this cycle.
I suspect that what happened, 12,000 years ago, is that the remnants of the great society that existed on the planet, some survivors managed to maintain and keep their hands on some pretty sophisticated weapons, and that some of those guys, like say, Zeus with his thunderbolt, or Thor with his hammer, or Lu with his magic spear, basically went out and took over various regions because they had a weapon that nobody could go up against. So they became their gods or their kings or leaders. And in some cases, actually forced the people to build giant monuments, probably in homage to their ancient civilization that was destroyed. So it looks like, imagine if that happened today. Imagine if all of a sudden an axis shift happened and humanity got knocked down to where there was no electric and all that, and say in 20 years later, right, some people managed to maintain some M16s, okay, and then they were go to an area where there was tribes that only had spears. Okay, what would that tribe do against somebody with even just one M16? What would they do? They could do nothing. That person could instantly become their leader or their god.
Yeah. And speaking of Buzz Aldrin, have you ever heard of a book that he wrote that was called Encounter with Tiber?
Yes, I've heard of it. I haven't read it, but yes, I've heard of it.
I have read it, and it's spooky similar to what's happening right now. It's about a race of people that were living on a planet, and they knew they had a Planet X object that was going to wipe out all the life on their planet. So they set out to find a new place to live, and that place happened to be, ta-da, the Earth.
Huh.
And
interesting.
They came here, and they were viewed as gods because they had all this advanced technology, and they kept a little bit of their technology once they got here, and they built a base on the moon and on Mars, and eventually they died out. And then in our time we found out about it and went to their planet and discovered what happened to them. And Buzz Aldrin wrote that.
Yeah, these guys have some inside connections. What I suspect is that the knowledge was first discovered a long time ago, and that they built the. You might laugh at this, but there's significant evidence to show that the Titanic was a total inside job too. That J.P. Morgan built the Titanic, and then invited all of his enemies onto the unsinkable ship that it was deemed, and then basically got rid of most of his enemies, and then the Federal Reserve was formed the very next year. So it was like all the people that imposed, like John Astor, was against the formation of the Federal Reserve, and so he ended up dying on the Titanic, and a lot of the opposition was wiped out. So I think that they've known for quite a long time that they needed to set up a monetary system with the Federal Reserve. It's the Federal Reserve charter ends at the end of 2012.
Yeah.
So not only that, but in the Capitol Rotunda, in the Capitol building, they have the Mayan calendar built right into the rotunda, and they show the Mayan people giving the technology to the Spanish. Not that the Spanish came and took it. They show that the Mayans actually giving them the technology. So there's definitely a lot more to this than meets the eye.
This is just so completely bizarre by now. The audience is probably all sitting there just kind of all dizzy.
Yeah, well, there's so many different facets. You got to pick one. You pick one, and then you research it. Pick the Denver or pick the ancient civilizations. All these years we've been told that the Great Pyramid, or actually the pyramids, one of the pyramids of the sun in South America is the biggest, but then the Great Pyramid in Egypt was the tallest, but that's not true. Just in the last few years, they've discovered a pyramid that's almost 5 times bigger than the Great Pyramid that's in Bosnia, and it's been buried under a mountain all these years. And now they just dug up obelisk and all that, and found spirals, and there's a really cool obelisk there at that one in Bosnia with a dragon with a spiral over its head. So
yeah, plus all of the ancient artifacts that they find in the coal seams when they're mining. I don't know if you've heard about those. I
suspect that there were probably pyramids all over the planet, and that when this shift happened 12,000 years ago, a good deal of them were flooded. A layer of sediment was laid down. Trees and grass grew up. It just became a mountain to the people. They didn't even notice that there was, 5 feet underneath the dirt was a pyramid.
Yeah, and here we go again.
Yeah.
Here we go again.
Yeah, and we do the same thing. Most people don't know that Mount Rushmore was not built for you and me. That thing was built actually thicker than what it's designed to look like. All the presidents' faces were designed thicker, so that in 10,000 years from now, the actual Mount Rushmore will look like the faces of the presidents were supposed to be presented.
Wow. And on that note, I believe we are about done with the show, folks. This has been a heck of a show, and I have to say that I really appreciate Lucas coming on. This is I've learned a lot, and I hope the audience has also learned a lot, and this is going to give them a good direction to go in their own research. And maybe we can get a couple of 100 Lucases out there doing some research, and we can uncover what these clowns are doing before this object comes and whacks us all back to the Stone Age.
Yeah, we're in for some crazy times, regardless.
Yeah. So anyways, I appreciate you coming on the show. I hope you had fun.
Yeah, it was awesome. I really appreciate you having me on, Bill.
Yeah, not a problem. And folks, this is going to be up on YouTube probably in an hour or so. So you'll be able to watch us, and we'll be doing some repeats, and we'll be on tomorrow night again with another interview. Believe it or not, 3 this week. Lucas, we appreciate you coming on the show, and thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank all your listeners for listening, and you have a great night.
Yep, you too. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
And that, folks, was our friend Lucas at rabbithole2.com. That's rabbithole2.com. astrological.com. We'll have a link up on the show page. And tomorrow night, we are going to have a woman that is a novelist. She has written 3 novels. She's getting ready to come out with her 4th novel. She has written, produced, and filmed her own movie about zombies. It's called Another Apocalyptic Zombie Movie, and it's actually, I suppose, a comedy. We have the trailer. We're going to show you the trailer of that movie tomorrow night. And she is going to be on. She actually owns one of the 10 most scariest places in the United States. And she's going to be on tomorrow night. Her name is Laura Ketchledge. You can look her up. Her website is LURAKETCH, LauraKetch.com. And she's going to be on tomorrow night at the same time. So, that's about it for the show. So until tomorrow night, on the same bat station, at the same bat time. I've always wanted to say that. Maybe our producers can get Batman on the show, Adam West. That would be a hoot. Bill Zam and Adam West. Oh boy. Okay, folks, we'll see you tomorrow night. I appreciate everybody showing up. Have a good evening, and watch out for the meteorites as they crash about your head. Good night.